I'm Shane Sege, and joining me today is Pat Scrimgeour, Director of Transit Customer Systems and Planning. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
So, ever since the Confederation line has opened, there's been numerous changes that have taken place. Strap hangers, increasing the dwell time at stations, temporary canopies. Can you tell us a little bit about what has been approved upon and what's still to come?
So there's a number of things. When we opened in September, and we started to hear back from customers what they were looking for, where they saw that they had problems, and then or opportunities to make things better. People started to travel through the stations as part of their regular trip and gave us some feedback. So the ones you mentioned, we've got the temporary canopies at Tunney's Pasture and at Herdman. We've put in a lot more signage at Blair to help people understand the different levels of the station. We got the markers down on the station platforms, reminding people to stand back at the downtown stations and at some of the stations we could get to before the weather got too cold.
So with the arrival of the train and the really big service change that took place in October, the city transformed from crosstown bus routes such as the 95 and whatnot to more of a hub and spoke system where the train is the main line through the city. Everyone connects to the neighborhood or the nearest station with the buses. They don't continue to go through. So how has that changed service for the city? How does that make or can make the bus service more reliable for people going downtown?
So there's a number of ways it changes. When the train's running reliably, it's obviously a much faster and much more consistent way of getting into and through downtown than the buses could be on the surface or running on the highways, and more capacity for the long run. We were floating around 10,000 people per hour per direction on the buses, and we knew that we couldn't move more than about 12 or 13,000 people. It just could not be done with all the buses we could put on the road. The train gives us the capacity, with future investment, longer trains, more trains, of getting up towards 24,000. So it more than doubles the capacity for downtown to grow and downtown to continue to expand for the decades to come, and just letting the whole regional economy expand in ways that it hasn't been able to before. Before the buses went on detour, when they were still running on the Transitway and on Albert and Slater through downtown, our figures showed us that between 2/3 and 3/4 of all of the variability in trip times, actual travel times for buses, was being affected by congestion and interference and stop delay in downtown. And so by removing that and moving all that customer movement downstairs and onto the train, the remainder of the bus service just got instantly more reliable. We were no longer, short term compared to the detours, we were no longer dealing with Scott Street and Nicholas and being on the bus lanes and getting on to the 174 at Blair and all of those things. But for the longer term, comparing back to where we were before construction, we were no longer dealing with all the cross streets, the delivery trucks, anything else that's going on at that street level through Albert and Slater. And so that all got moved to the train. The train will run more reliably long term, and is running probably more reliably right now, except for those very bad days. The trade-off for that is that people have to change between vehicles. If they're coming in from Orleans through here, they have to change from bus to train at Blair. But the main thing that they're gaining personally is reliability, and the other thing that the city is gaining is the capacity to be able to move much more people in the future.
So we talked a little while ago about the temporary canopies that were installed at Herdman and Tunney's Pasture. Operative word being temporary. Yeah. There is a permanent solution in the works. Can you talk a little bit about that and what kind of timeline we could be looking at for something to be a little more permanent in that sense?
Sure. So there's not a lot of space at Blair to do things temporarily, and we know that the east end of the south bus platform at Blair has been very busy, uncomfortably busy in the afternoon rush hour. So the first thing that we've started to do already is we're spacing the buses out among 3 stops on the south platform. That'll reduce the number of people boarding at the busiest stop by about 30%, 34% actually. and we'll spread that out a little bit. The next is that we've been watching how are people choosing whether to use the shelter, and a lot of people are, even though they can stay out of the rain, the wind, the cold, when they're in the shelter, a lot of people are staying out of the shelter because that way they can move more quickly and they don't think they're going to get boxed in. So what we're going to proceed with there is we're looking at a long canopy, so that there's like there is here on the train platform, so there's a continuous canopy the full length of that platform with some windbreaks, and we'll get that built so that it's right back against the wall, so we're not losing that space that we need for snow storage and for access to electrical cabinets that's there along the south side now. That'll give a lot more, and then we can take the shelters out. The shelters will be replaced by this big canopy. That'll give more room for people to walk. We need to accommodate the people who are walking along the platform longitudinally. We need to accommodate the people who are at their bus stop standing and waiting for their bus, and we need to be able to accommodate the movement of people on and off the buses. So if we can segregate or at least leave room for those three functions in three zones, then we'll have a better, easier, more fluid movement of people on that platform. And that has to last us through until the Stage 2 extensions to the east, currently expected for 2024 or so, when the nature of Blair Station becomes much different than it is now. The station can get smaller. It'll be mostly the local feeder routes and not the long distance routes, because those people will be moved to O-train stations further east.
And then talking about Herdman, a temporary shelter was created there. There's been a lot of talk online. People are wondering why the station underneath, like on the concourse underneath, why the glass at the end could not be removed and it be extended underneath the guideway so that there's more shelter. Is that something that could be done, or is there like a land problem with the NCC? Or
I'm not sure the details. I know that there are some. I think we own most of the land now. There might be some long-term commitments on what different spots of land are there for. We'll see how we need to keep Herdman up to date and move it along, what we should build permanently, what we should keep. The thing that's different about Herdman than the other two big stations is that it'll stay pretty much in its same function for the long term. There's not an extension coming there. It'll just get busier. So, you would have seen at Herdman that over on the south side, around the horseshoe curve, there's more platforms over there that we don't need to use yet. That'll be a long walk from the train. But when we do get there in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, the space is there, and people will need to walk around, and will need more weather protection or customer information, whatever however the system evolves by then. There's been different suggestions on how to do things around the west end of Herdman. We're starting with the design that the design build company built for us, and we'll see how we adapt it over the years to come. Blair is our priority right now because that's where the congestion is occurring on the south side. But we need to think about, yes, what we're doing at Herdman, what we're going to do on the south side at Tunney's Pasture long term, because that's the side that stays long term as this line gets extended west, and obviously we'll try to get similar attributes, similar amenities at Blair and at Tunney's, and see how they best adapt to Herdman as well.
Now, changing it up a little bit, back in September it was announced that Happy Goat Coffee Company will be arriving at some of the O-train stations, so notably Blair, Herdman, Rideau, and Tunney's Pasture. And then we saw in the news recently that they're hoping to open them in April and May. How do you think this is going to change the dynamic at the stations?
It'll be another. The stations are still primarily, obviously, transportation hubs and points in people's movement, but it gives an opportunity for people to grab some food, grab something to drink while they're on the way. It'll change the circulation patterns in those stations a bit from what people have become used to these first few months. But it'll become another part of what is usual and normal, and people who are walking into the stations might just get their coffee or their drink there, and they're setting out in the morning, or on their way home in the afternoon they might stop and pick up a sandwich and take it home to have have dinner. It's as they want to use it. So it's just another function, another attribute that's there that we wanted to be there. It's taken us until now to get it administered. It's going to take a little while now for Happy Goat to get their stores built. You've seen in the stations, there's signs up now at those 4 stations where the shops are going to be. So they'll come in fairly soon with some construction, fencing and hoarding, and start doing their work. And we'd like them to get in, get done, and get out and open up as fast as possible. And I know they want to as well.
Now, beyond those concessions that are going to be opening, is there possibility for other stations to have concessions, retailers, quickies, whatnot in the future as we see how things go with these first 4?
Maybe. We'll see. Those are the 4 locations that we had RTG design and build and include in their designs. They told us where they could make open space. We asked them to create space in as many stations as they could. Or maybe not as many, but where they could. And so those are the 4 that are designated where we can make them out of the main flow of people, where we've got electrical and water and sewage connections there already. To go into new areas of the stations might require more work. We'd have to get more utilities in there. We'd have to watch more closely where the customer flow is. So there's not a lot more space in the downtown stations. They are their size and kind of boxed in now. There might be more room in the above ground. There might be more room as the nature of these stations evolves when stage 2 comes along, but at the same time there'll be less customer volume and perhaps less of a business case. There's also other ideas. We've got space where we can do sort of transient pop-up retail if people want to do that. We've seen examples in other cities and other countries of a very flat retail too, where it's just either it's cases against a wall that you get from, or even in I think one spot in Toronto, and other examples we've seen from Korea where it's really a picture on a wall and people are clicking barcodes. I don't know if it was just a gimmick or if that's going to last long term, but a way of doing online ordering. And one of the other things that we're doing with those open spaces is the buskers, so we can get musicians in, and that competition's open now, and we're looking forward to seeing what musicians we get applications from.
So, like you said, the busking program, the applications process has started. It seems like it's going to be a fairly organized operation that's going to be done for the busking. How is it going to be structured? Will there be at the busy stations, like let's say downtown, will there be a fairly continuous presence of busking? Will there be some way to encourage that kind of thing? Obviously, at a station like Searville here, where flow is very little, there's probably going to be very little, if any, happening here. But at the busy stations, will there be some way of encouraging that to be like a constant daily thing?
We're certainly going to try, but it's what we can do is we can support it. We will, the city through its Ottawa Music Strategy is helping to select the musicians who will have a permit. We're going to supply a scheduling system so that they can go online and book times in the stations. But between when they want to perform and when they're finding that they're making the most money in tips for performing, when our customers want to see them there, that's a market-driven timing. We're not going to require anyone to be there at any time, but we're going to use the scheduling system to make sure that we deal with any contention, so they're not coming and saying, I got the spot, no, I got the spot. They know when they've got the time, they can come in, they can perform. We'll see if we need to change the settings, if we're starting with everyone having an hour here and an hour there and it takes them 20 minutes to set up, maybe they'd rather have 2-hour windows. And if there's not a lot of contention for a space and people are sorting themselves out and one takes Parliament, one takes Lion, and they swap on alternate weeks, then that might work out too. We'll have to see who the musicians are, and start how they're going to select themselves. How they got to decide that they're interested, and then they'll start to give us feedback on how we can support them to exhibit their music and entertain our customers.
And when do you anticipate the first buskers appearing in the stations? Would that be in the spring or the summer of this year?
We're hoping it'll be the spring. Again, we've asked for applications. We will get through the auditioning process. We'll get our scheduling system up and running and get them introduced to it. And we'll do that as quickly as we can.
Now, OC Transpo makes use of the Presto card by Metrolinx. People can reload their card online. They can now reload them in the stations with the ticket vending machines. They have a very useful video chat function. I actually used it once with my family because I picked one adult ticket by mistake instead of the family, so they were able to correct that, which was great. What kind of opportunities are in the future now? People have like Apple Pay, Android Pay, and all that kind of stuff. Is there a possibility of having smartphones being able to allow access through the fare gates and on buses and whatnot?
There's a couple of things we're looking at there. One is, first of all, phones already can be used at the ticket machines. That was something we got in from the very beginning. We're looking at the possibility of whether we can take debit cards and credit cards being tapped. We're getting pretty far down that road. We're not, it's not all locked down yet. At the same time, Presto's looking at, there's the Presto app, which you can get on phones. And one of the things that the Presto app can do now on certain Android phones is you can actually recharge your Presto card on the phone without having to go to a Shoppers Drug Mart or one of our sales offices, or tap it on a bus to get all the information will get there, and you can tap the card against the phone. They're looking at expanding that. They're working with Apple to be able to expand that to iPhones. And they're looking also at can they replicate, how soon can they get to the point that a Presto card is replicated by the phone. So they're working on that. They're also working on what they call open payment, which is the use of credit cards and debit cards to tap on the card readers.
Now, two other things I want to talk about. The next stop timing for buses and all that, obviously that's been a bit of a challenge lately for people knowing when the next bus is coming. At the last Transit Commission, and I think prior to that, yourself or Mr. Manconi or Mr. Charter have explained that you don't know when the bus is going to arrive if it hasn't started its run.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit about how it's become a little more challenging over the past year versus the past, where things seem to be fairly consistent as far as knowing when the bus was coming?
Yeah, so there's at least two sides to that. One of the first thing is that we were the first big transit system in the country, and I think the first big transit system in North America to make real-time information available to our customers. At that point, it was done with the 560 texting, and that expanded into the apps, and now then the API and the data stream, the independent apps, the screens we have in the stations. So we were one of the first. It was some software that our programmers built themselves. It wasn't a market-supported thing. We were doing what we could. We were building it off of our vehicle location system, which came with for the announcements on the buses, the next stop announcements, using that data as much as we could. Over that time, which has probably been, 8 or 10 years, over that time the transit software market has got better, and there is now company-supported, vendor-supported software that we can buy, which has more math in it, more thought, more experience in it than what we built first. So the first thing on that is that we're now buying a replacement software for how we control our buses across the whole system, from the home-built system that we've been using for years and years and years and updating. We're now buying close to, it's off the shelf, but a lot of customization for what Ottawa needs. So that's coming in this year, first half, middle of this year. One of the things that it has is a little bit more ability to look, what I'd say, back in time, or to look at where the bus is going to be before it starts the trip. And it's an easy thing to do if you're dealing with one bus. It's not an easy thing to do if you're dealing with 8,000, 8,700 trips a day, because each bus is either spending more time, less time, coming from a different place, coming from the garage before it starts that trip. So looking back in the database and seeing where is that bus now, and where will it be, what time will it get to where it is, and when will it finish all its terminal functions and be ready to go, is something that they're working on, but it's not an easy thing to do. The certainty of when a bus is going to come is really based on the bus is coming. The equivalent of looking down the street and seeing it coming and going, all right, it's going to take 3 minutes to get here from where I can see it. Or if you were up in the sky, it's going to take 7 minutes to get there. Using the GPS location of the bus to predict when it's going to get to you is the real core piece of information, is where is the bus right now and how long does it usually take to get from where it is right now to where you're standing. And that's what we're doing now, and that's what any vehicle location system has to do in the future. What changed is because, what changed for a lot of people is because we now have bus routes that start at Blair, Herdman, and Tunney's Pasture rather than continuing through from downtown. The people at Tunney's Pasture don't know when the bus is going to leave because the bus hasn't started moving yet. So at Tunney's Pasture, at Blair, at Herdman, at st-Laurent, we publish primarily scheduled time, and that's marked on the screens just by the number. If it's got a star beside it, or if you're using the OC Transpo app, it's got the green background behind it. That tells you that it's GPS corrected. It's real location of the bus and a prediction of how long it's going to take to get to you. So that's really when you're certain. But we're going to see if we can provide a little more once we get the new software in place. Now, another problem that came into this is that for a little while back in the fall, we were having a database problem which just wasn't feeding the correct information to the API for the independent apps to publish through the open data stream, and that was corrected, and we got past that. But there was a time when our database administrators had to log into the system and reboot and restart the database program at like 3 or 4 every morning, because there was some deep inside that database there was some data or coding problem. But we seem to be past that now.
Stage 2.
Yeah.
It's going to be extended to Place Orleans and Trim.
Right.
To the west, it's going to go to Lincoln Fields and then branch off from there to Moody and Baseline.
Yeah.
So how is the frequency going to work? Obviously, when it gets to Lincoln Fields, it's going to split 2 ways. So Can you explain a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, there's about 3 different patterns. If we imagine, let's say we're still at we're going to be 3 or 4 minutes. Let's say we're by that point at 3 minutes, because we'll have, might be a few more customers by that point. We might be up to 3 minutes. If we have a train going through the central part of the system every 3 minutes at rush hours, at just south of Lincoln Fields, the line splits in 2, and half the trains will go to Moody, half the trains will go to Baseline. So that would mean there'd be a train every 6 minutes to each. When we get in the middle of the day, now we're running a train every 5 minutes through the core section. That would mean a train every 10 minutes on each of those two branches. To the east end, the service plan that Council approved and adopted when we started the Stage 2 design and procurement was that in the morning rush hour, all the trains that are going to Baseline will start at Trim, and half the trains that are going to Moody will start at Trim. The other half will start at Blair. And that sort of matches, that's the best we could come to matching the customer demand east of Blair. So in the morning rush hour, we would have 3/4 of the capacity starting at Trim, and then from Blair, every 4th train will start there just to supplement on the busier section going west. In the afternoon, all the trains would go to Trim so that we don't have people getting caught out and going, oh, this train only goes to Baseline, and then they have to squeeze, or only goes to Blair, and then squeezing back onto a train. So that's the standard pattern that would run. So in the morning rush hour, we would have half the Moody trains starting at Blair, the other half starting at Trim, all the Baseline trains starting at Trim. Through the middle of the day, the rest of the day, and into the evening, all the trains would start at Trim, and go to Lincoln Fields and split. And then the other difference is after 11 at night, Monday to Thursday, the plan is that because we still need to have a train every 15 minutes on the core section, but we don't want to have only a train every half hour to Moody and every half hour to Baseline. So the plan is that all the trains at that time of night going out of downtown will go to Baseline, and then we run a shuttle train from Lincoln Fields to Moody on the west branch. So if you're going from Parliament to Canada after 11 at night, Monday to Thursday, you would take a train to Lincoln Fields, walk across the platform. We'll make a nice cross-platform, or it might not be directly across the platform, but from one platform to the other. But the train will pull right in or be ready to pick you up, and then off you go to Moody. And that's based on the fact that we expect ridership on the Moody branch to be a little bit lower than ridership on the Baseline branch, and so we can give the larger group of people the direct service. So those are the three service patterns that we have: the morning rush hour, the late evening Monday to Thursday, and everything else. And of course these the display screens will show where the next train is going, and we'll provide all the information to customers on where the train's going, when the next train that's going where they're going is coming.
Right now we're operating with the 13 trains, hoping to get to 15. How many trains would you say would be needed to serve the service that you're outlining, let's say in the peak for Stage 2?
Oh, wow. So it's 30... It's 30... We will have... there's 34 in the first order, there's 4 in the second order, and there's 34 in the third order, so that adds up to 72 trains, if I'm right. 72 cars, 36 trains. You figure on 4 to 6 of those being either hot spares that are standing by or deeper in maintenance. I'm not sure of the maintenance ratios on the Stage 2 fleet, but if it matches the Stage 1, it was supposed to be 15 trains of service, 1 hot spare and 1 in longer term maintenance. If the same patterns are around, then it should take about 20, it should be 30, 32 trains to run that service. I know we've done that math, I just don't have it in my head. It's back at the office.
That's okay. Well, thank you very much for answering all of our questions and providing some insight into what's to come and how things are going right now.
You're very welcome. Very nice to talk to you.